Is here, John Hendrix, who covers the New Orleans Saints for SI. John, me and you talked off air, and yesterday was one of the more eventful days I think that I've had on Twitter because the report came out, and which I'm going to ask you, which is my first question about Mike Thomas. John, is he being released? What's going on with this whole Mike Thomas situation right now that you know?
Well, I mean, his contract was structured. He was always going to be a free agent, right? I mean, that's the thing is he's got the void years. He had signed the 1-year deal last offseason to be with him, but he's going to be a free agent. So, of course, if you want to talk about the wording or whatever, but it was always designed to be that way, right? And so, again, it was not a mystery where it's like something like people are treating this like it's new information that he's being released or he wasn't going to be like. The design was always he was going to be a free agent. So anything else that has come out, it's kind of a little bit, I don't know if to say misleading, but people treating it like it's the first time they've heard it. Y'all got to wake up. Y'all got to stop following these aggregate accounts too.
Well, the way that I read it from, I think it was Catherine Terrell. Again, don't know what I don't know, but she had said that, if they released him before the new year started, there was like bonuses or something or voice.
Yeah, that's
and I'm just kind of like, okay, are we fighting? Basically, John, what I'm trying to figure out is, are we fighting over semantics?
I think so. I mean, because that is the big thing. Is it because of the timing of it? That's the question. Is it the timing of the release is going to dictate? Because a lot of these players have types of clauses in their contract. Derek Carr is one of them. He's on the 5th day of the league year. He's owed a $10 million roster bonus. It's going to come tack on to 2025. So a lot of it has to do with the language. So it's one of those that if they keep him on the roster, there are some guarantees and all this other stuff. But that's why you have to look at the verbiage in the contract. You have to look at the contract and look. Catherine, she knows her stuff. So you definitely would want to make sure that you tidy up on that and look at it because she's definitely in the know when it comes to that for sure.
John, I'm just going to be honest. When she had tweeted like what they have to do, like verbiage, I'm like, okay, well, the way that it reads, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but it sounds like, okay, well, technically maybe on paper they release him because of, who cares? I mean, regardless. But here we are. John, we've talked about this a little bit, but kind of want to dive into it just a bit. Look, Mike Thomas will forever be a legend. As a Saint, you can't take that away. But there were complications about not having the surgery in the offseason, him even playing hurt during, trying to make that run with Breeze. But maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm getting older. I got some gray in my beard here. Maybe I'm just a get off my lawn. Maybe I just don't like what I see from him always on social media. And I think this is a great, I don't want to say great, but it's a good thing. Maybe both parties move on, have success. And I think it's just best for everyone overall. What says you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the best course of action, right? And again, everything that I was told at the combine, this is what it was by design. And now, of course, the other stuff, the off the field stuff, all that, they address that in-house, right? I mean, those are types of things. Now, the stuff that has happened with Carr, I mean, those are types of things where you feel like it's a point of no return, right? I mean, that's just kind of how it's designed. And look, you said it, and I wrote something this morning talking about just the fact that, look at his laundry list of accomplishments. That you can't take that away from him. You can't take away his receptions leader in 2019, his offensive player. There's so many things you can't. But once he got hurt in 2020, everything changed for him. I mean, this is a guy that had a clear Hall of Fame trajectory. He's going to finish number 4 on the Saints all-time receiving yardage leader list, and he's got all these things he's done. But here's what I've learned about Michael Thomas, that when he can't do what he loves to do, it's a problem. And of course, look, if we weren't able to do the things we love, we'd be frustrated. We'd be acting a certain way. Now, is that the best way to unleash yourself? Maybe not, but we also live in an age where social media is very prominent that, everything you say can be taken out of context. Everybody reads into his story. He's posting song lyrics, all this other stuff. But look, it's one of those things where the Saints, they brought in Coach Keith Williams. He's a guy that's more reminiscent of Curtis Johnson. They've got this young wide receiver core with A.T. Perry, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed, which he's actually going to be back with the Saints. I know some people have been confused about this exclusive rights deal. They're just going to likely give him a bump and such, but there's no negotiating with other teams. But with Thomas, it's unfortunate. And the guy, validity to his claims, if he didn't get hurt, he might have been having that light 1,000-yard season. I mean, we'll never know, but that's just the same thing with like the Jameis Winston situation. We'll just never know, but it's unfortunate for a guy who was so instrumental in the Saints offense for years that this is kind of how things end. And you know, one of the other things, I can't remember a Saints player that's had a storybook ending. I mean, it didn't end well for Breeze. It didn't end well for Jimmy Graham, really. I mean, it just didn't end well for a lot of players, and Thomas is just another example of that.
Well, and John, that was really what I was going to bring up is this is like the Jimmy Graham thing. None of this ever for superstar players never ends well. I mean,
Yeah.
the only better transition, I guess, was Breeze because look, he just ultimately retired. He didn't get what he wanted, but at least there wasn't massive amounts of chaos, him walking out the door. Let me ask you this though: does now a receiver in the draft become a play here with Mike Thomas out the door?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's kind of what I've been alluding to is the fact that I could see there a change. Now, look, they're going to need to add through free agency because let's run down some of the free agents. Shaq Davis went to Philly on a reserve future contract. Keith Kirkwood is an unrestricted free agent. Lynn Bowden had offseason surgery, so he's not ready. So really, you have 3 receivers on the roster. Now, I am of the impression, and I could read between the lines, that Hunter Renfrow is going to be a cap casualty in Las Vegas. He just is. Saints were interested in him during the trade deadline. I could see that being an easy add, but it depends if he's going to fit this Clint Kubiak system. And you got to remember, Kubiak's ties, Andrew Janako's ties go longer than just San Francisco. It goes to Minnesota.
Right.
So guys that were in there, like a KJ Osborne, could be somebody that's in play. I really like Juwan Jennings in this offense. There are going to be players that are going to be available. But here's the thing. The Saints need to find a possession receiver. They're not going with the top tier guys. And so the T. Higgins, all those guys are the premier talent, the cream of the crop. They're not going to be playing in that space. And so I say all that to say they're going to probably add some guys that fit the system. Maybe they can try to find a possession receiver. I threw out, again, take it for what it's worth, I threw out Odell Beckham Jr. just because he worked with Keith Williams. I know the Saints had been interested in him before. I think that's more of a monetary situation, but maybe he goes the Jarvis Landry route and tries it. But I just don't know because Tyron just signed, an extension to be with him. Maybe that's a way to get him on, but we'll have to see how that plays out. But it opens the door because they still have other glaring needs. They got to figure out this offensive line. It's a better outlook than what they had thought. They really need a game changer at pass rusher or from the interior. I think 14, it depends on how free agency plays out, but if they can address those, then yeah, I'm all in favor of getting somebody at 14 that's a wide receiver or even a tight end, because I think that's also a need for this team. And so 14 and 45, I absolutely think that one of those picks will be a skill position player or absolutely a wide receiver.
Does Brock Bowers make a lot of sense to you in this draft at 14?
I mean, he's a kind of one of those freak athletes, a league of his own. I wish he did stuff at the combine, but I mean, pro day is going to obviously be important for him. But look, I love this guy for a couple of years now. I think people have seen him that he has that ability, and I'm not going to put him in the Travis Kelce bucket or anything like that. But we've seen tight ends make a difference. Dalton Kincaid was a huge one I was really high on. I mean, you saw Dalton Schultz and what he was able to do with the Texans. There are guys that can get you a lot more production. Now, I know that they do believe a lot in Juwan Johnson. Taysom Hill's going to be a lot more involved in this offense. I don't know if that's going to be the tight end position per se, but, you got him and Foster Moreau. But you've got to get somebody that's going to be able to have that ability. Not saying it's George Kittle ability or anything, but has that upside. And Brock Bowers is a guy that makes a lot of sense for this potential offense. And so they're going to have to do their due diligence. And of course, you only have 2 picks within the top 50. They're going to get some compensatory picks, probably 3 fifth-rounders is what's going to happen. You may have ammo. I mean, it opens the door about this Marcus Lattimore stuff. I mean, there's so many different things. It's never a dull moment covering this team. I will just say that. In the 10 plus years, I'd never recall any offseason that was normal for this team. And it's just an exciting time, but there is just so many things. They still have to get under the cap, but it's coming.
I think that your Twitter fight about the salary cap is probably when I know that spring is here. Like the time is going to be moved forward. A new clock. So I always do think that's funny. Let's touch on a couple of the things that you mentioned there. Obviously, a big off season when it comes to coaching carousel. Your thoughts on Kubiak being the OC?
I like it. I think what I like is, look, Pete Carmichael did a lot of great things for this offense for a long time, but mostly it's been the same for 15 plus years. It's time
Right.
for a change. I like their philosophy and what Kubiak brings. Now, a lot of people have talked about, oh, this is going to be more of a Kyle Shanahan style offense, but no, it goes further than that. It goes more to a Gary Kubiak style when he was with the Texans. And so there's going to be semblances of Kyle Shanahan, a lot of this wide zone scheme, play action, motion, all these types of things. And when the Saints did it last year, it worked. And I'm a strong advocate of play action, strong advocate of motion, because if you can get the defense off for just even a half second, it does so many different things. And you saw it in the Super Bowl. You saw what San Francisco was able to do, even though, Steve Spagnuolo was able to call a really good game defensively. And I picked the Chiefs because of that. But, it's one of those that you look at Kubiak, a young guy, and they've mixed him in with some older guys like John Benton and Rick Dennison. And so I think this has the potential to work. Now, what I've been told is that they know this is probably going to be a process. And so much like when they reconstructed their defense, which started in 2016 mainly because, they had Rob Ryan. Dennis Allen was a senior defensive assistant. He takes over as defensive coordinator. They start retooling, start getting their thing. And by 2017, they had all the pieces in place to be a really successful defense. Now, it shouldn't take that long here in New Orleans. You've got some good offensive pieces to the puzzle. Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, there's been a lot of speculation. They're supposed to be in the plans for this year. They're not supposed to be traded. That's as of right now. Things obviously can change, but that's everything I was told about it. So they're wanting to make this thing work, and they have some pieces there. I think they just need to add to it. But again, this system doesn't really work unless you have the offensive line, and there are some question marks. They do feel good about Ryan Ramczyk and his outlook. He's not supposed to miss the start of training camp. Andres Pete is going to be a free agent. You got James Hurst, and they're not moving positions with Trevor Penning at the moment, but I still think they're lacking a little bit of something there, a little bit of punch that's needed. And so it's something that they could look to free agency to address. I don't like the let's draft somebody a project and let's see if it's going to work out. I'd rather go with somebody who's proven, understands the scheme from day one, and is able to come in and make that impact.
Yeah, Leatherwood from Alabama. I know a lot of Alabama players haven't necessarily always made massive contributions, but I know an NFL scout who said that he thinks that he is the highest graded guy coming out of Alabama since Ryan Kelly, the center for Indianapolis. So if you get somebody like that, we'll have to see, because that could be a long-term play here. John Hendrix joining us. John, let me ask you about Lattimore, because you brought it up a couple of times, and I think that, look, I think he is arguably, when he's on the field, one of the best corners in the league. I don't think that you can make an argument about that. But the problem is, and I will say as how Mummy always used to tell us, the best ability is availability, and he's not always available. The trade stuff has come up. What do you think ultimately happens here with Marshon Lattimore?
I mean, it is a 50-50 ball, but again, you mentioned it. When he's on the field, he takes away roughly half of the field. I mean, that's just how good he is. The Saints still believe in his ability. They still believe that he's a high-performing player. And look, these injuries have been flukes. I mean, he got rolled up on in Indianapolis, and the year before, he was playing kind of compensate for somebody out of position. And I mean, how do you plan for like a lacerated kidney or all those types of things in the end zone? Like, you just don't.
Right.
And so it's frustrating because Marshon wants to be on the field. And, I think it's important because, Mickey Loomis, Dennis Allen, they kind of, I don't want to say lay down the law, but it's pretty much you're here and you're bought in or you're not. And so Marshon is one of those guys that I think if he can, take to that message, I think he has a place here for sure. And I think he's best in a Saints uniform, right? And this is not like a CJ Gardner-Johnson situation, right? This is not a contract situation. Lattimore is under contract, and so there are some things where you wait it out, and if they did want more ammo, they could do it. But Isaac Yiadom is a free agent that they feel like has a home here, and so they got to look at probably re-signing him. They wouldn't rule out putting Alante back at the outside if they did something that moved on. So that's something to keep in mind. But Lattimore, if you can get some good assets and you feel like you're okay with moving on from your best player defensively besides Demario Davis, then I don't know if that's something that you pull the trigger on, but I think it's something where they feel comfortable with this defensive scheme. I'm of the impression I think you have to keep Lattimore just because you don't want to have that drop off defensively. I know you've had some things, but they're one injury away from that being really bad if they don't have somebody like Lattimore there. But
Right.
it's just a thing where it will have further information, but as of right now, I gotta say it's a 50-50 ball, and I feel like they're of the impression that they really do want to keep Lattimore at this point.
John, this defense is getting a little older. Cam Jordan during the combine, I thought was pretty funny. He said that his knees don't work like they used to. He was making some jokes in reference to like I'm the older guy here. Like these kids weren't even in some of them weren't were in kindergarten when I was in college. I thought it was kind of funny. This defense is older though. What are your thoughts overall? I mean, look, it's been arguably one of the best defenses that we've had in the Saints era, but it also you get to a point where a lot of guys getting older. How do you think all of this ultimately shakes out?
Yeah, it's a tough space because I think one of the glaring needs that we're probably not talking about is linebacker, and that's not because of Demario Davis, because I still think he can play at a high level and he takes care of his body enough to do that. But Pete Werner didn't have the greatest of years last season. I think that you look at the depth behind him. I mean, it's only DeMarco Jackson right now, who's more of a special teamer, and then Nephi Sewell is a guy that's got an ACL problem, and he's not going to be ready for the start of training camp. And then Zach Bond's a free agent. I like the fact that they use him as a pass rusher, but the Saints run a nickel formation a lot of times instead of the base. And so you need to have a good pass rush and you need to have the secondary. I feel like they have the secondary, right? Even with everything that's potentially changing, safety position with Marcus May being out of the picture, I'd love to see him re-sign Jonathan Abram and Lonnie Johnson Jr. there. I think what they have in the secondary is great and formidable. Linebacker, I think they can address some things free agency wise to maybe get some extra depth there that maybe makes them feel a little bit better about themselves. But really, it's the front four is where I'm looking at, because I think they have some tools there, but you look at Isaiah Foskey, Peyton Turner, those are two players you just haven't got the contributions for. Now, Foskey's coming in his second year. He played hurt a lot. He was trying to get back on the field. A lot of times when the team was away doing things, he was still at the facility rehabbing. And so it's unfortunate how his first year went. And of course, people want to put the bust label on stuff, but I really love what they did with Brian Brzee. I think he was an excellent pick for this team. I like the fact of Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard in there. They're trying to figure out about Malcolm Roach. If what I was understood is that he might test the market a little bit, and so they might have to find somebody there potentially. But it's really on the outside because Carl Granderson is their pass rush really right now. I think Tano does a pretty good job too. But with Cam, he was playing hurt. I just don't see the game changer. And really, when you look at it, if they can get away from their prototypes potentially and go with a smaller frame guy like what Zach Bond's able to do, a guy like Leonard Floyd makes a good bit of sense in pass rush center situations. And so I could see them looking in that aspect that they're not going to get the Danielle Hunters. They're not going to get any marquee person that's out there, but some of this market fallout is going to happen. And so I say all that to say there is some concern about having an aging roster when it comes to defense. I feel good about where they're at. I just don't know if they have something there that can take them to the next level. And I think that's what they got to find.
If you want Danielle Hunter, just let me know. I'll make a phone call. I mean, you got. But I will tell you, the Saints can't afford him right now. I'm just gonna throw that
no
out
way.
there.
No way.
John, a couple more for you. Listen, I am mostly college football, LSU, stuff like that, but we do talk a little NFL and Saints here. So I do want to go around the league with you right quick. You said you were at the Combine. I have never in my life defended an LSU player more than I've defended Jayden Daniels, especially behind this J.J. McCarthy thing. John, maybe I need to take a holistic view. Maybe I'm too involved into it here, with it being Jayden. How is J.J. McCarthy in this conversation with the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Jayden Daniels? Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. I also think it's funny watching the if Bo Nix did this and that and all this stuff too. That's always a fun one to watch. But I'm like, you saw what Jayden Daniels able to do. And I saw a video too the other day is like, oh, Jayden Daniels doesn't believe in, shying away from contact. It was like a negative view of him taking all these hits and stuff. I think there's just so much to appreciate about what Jayden Daniels did, especially at LSU. If he had a competent defense behind him, there's no telling what LSU would have done.
He might be the number
season.
1 overall pick, John. He could
Yeah,
have been a
exactly.
Burrow type of run here.
Yeah, but this time of year you get so much misinformation, and that's why, again, these aggregate accounts, they're just going to only pick and choose, cherry pick what they want to use and do it. They don't represent any facts. And I even saw his agency had combated a report saying, oh, Jayden doesn't want to go here, right? It's a draft. He'll go wherever he wants to go because it's going to be the opportunity for him. And people will see him as a starting quarterback. I know his ability is beyond just being a mobile quarterback. I mean, he can throw balls. He can do a lot of things in the offense for you. I just don't get some of these other conversations that come out. And it's just about the talking heads trying to stir up stuff right now, this time of year, maybe to help their prospect out. It's just unnecessary, right? And Jayden Daniels, wherever he lands, and there's some teams out there. I mean, you look at it, Kirk Cousins is probably not going to be back in Minnesota, right? The Raiders need a quarterback. I think that's another spot to look at. There are teams out there that are going to need a quarterback. And I feel like Jayden Daniels is somebody that you can build around, right? And somebody that you can get day one. I think back to a guy like Malik Willis that, people were in love with him at Senior Bowl. I just never bought the hype. And so I just, what do I know? But I just didn't see it. And obviously he's not doing that well in the league and, with Will Levis and stuff. But I think this is different with Daniels. I think he's going to be a cream of the crop quarterback when it's all said and done. And of course, only time's going to tell, but I think this league is built for quarterbacks, and a guy like him, he's going to make his mark.
Staying in the division really quickly. Am I wrong in thinking that the Bucs would be fools not re-signing Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, I think they would be. I mean, they just locked up Mike Evans, and so 2 more years of Mike Evans, you got to have somebody to throw to him. And look, Mayfield's a guy that he proved himself. Again, whatever you think about him, I think he did a good enough job, a formidable job to earn another shot in Tampa. It just depends. Are they going to pay him like better money or like even more? Or does his camp want more? But you can't argue with what the Bucs did. They won the division when they weren't supposed to, right? And so a lot of that was derived from Mayfield's play. I mean, and Mike Evans is strong. They have a very talented team that in a lot of ways I think is underrated. And so I think if you're Tampa, you'd be fools not to sign Baker Mayfield, because I don't know what your contingency plan would be if you don't. Atlanta's going to try to figure out things. I think they're probably going to be on a rebound, especially if they can land a quarterback. Carolina's kind of in the dumpster right now. I don't see them doing anything. And so the Saints, they're committed to Derek Carr long-term. And so you kind of have your pick here is, are you going to keep with Baker because of what he's been able to do and then ride it out? Or are you going to try to go with a wild card that has to rebuild this chemistry with Mike Evans and all these other guys? I think if I'm Tampa, I'm making it happen with Baker because you have to.
All I'm going to say is if I see another kid from Louisiana on the Bucs, I'm going to throw up. Like Trey Palmer, a kid that, look, he was at Kentwood, my cousin, my first cousin, and a guy that I consider probably my best friend was his baseball coach when Kentwood finally got baseball. And he's like, Blake, this kid's going to be an all SEC athlete. Well, he just goes to Nebraska. You know the story. But I'm just tired of seeing that. You brought up Atlanta. Last question here for you, John. I think they are the most intriguing, and I hate to say this because New Orleans fans, and I do too, we hate the Falcons, but I think they're in the most intriguing situation here, John, because they have pieces. Like they have a good running back. They have some good they have a good tight end, got some really talented young wide receivers. John, is Atlanta about to move up here, in your opinion, in the draft to get a QB?
Well, I think Raheem Morris is big. I mean, he's extremely well respected, and he's going to be a much better coach than what they've had in their track history. I'll say that for sure. But with a quarterback, I think, and one of the things I had mentioned is I think that you might look at this year, and I don't want to say stopgap quarterback because I'm not trying to say the disrespect to Kirk Cousins or anything like that. But I think that's kind of the space to be in, is that you got these pieces in place. Get you a quarterback, even if it is on a one-year deal, somebody that's a proven veteran like a Cousins. I don't know if Russell Wilson would be somebody that consider, but they're going to be guys to take a look at. I was never sold on Desmond Ridder. I was never sold on Taylor Heineke. I think I even told you on your show, I was like,
You
it's
did.
only a matter of time that they were going to swap to Heineke because Ritter's not the guy. And so
Right.
they're an intriguing team. Now they'd have some turnover. Obviously, defensively, they've got no more Ryan Nielsen there, so it's going to be Raheem Morris a good bit in instilling his scheme. I think defensively, they've got talent. I think offensively, they got some pieces in place. I mean, Bijan is a monster. If they can unlock Kyle Pitts, I mean, who would think? And Drake London has proved himself as well. And so I think the pieces are there for Atlanta to get better, but it all hinges on their quarterback. And if they can't find a quarterback, if they go with a mid-tier or something, they're just going to end up in the same boat, I feel like, even with a difference in coach and all that type of stuff.
The team is in my ear. They've asked me this 5 times, so I'll go ahead and just ask. Jameis Winston. Is he back next year?
I could see it, but I think with Jameis, look, he wants to start, right? And you got to think Jameis is a native of Birmingham. If he could play for Atlanta and start for Atlanta, I think that would make a lot of sense because, he's close to home. And look, Jameis is a guy. I mean, we talked with him at the HBCU combine. I mean, the guy is still ever present in New Orleans, doing a lot of things in the community. And so, look, it's up in the air. I think with Jameis, he wants to have that opportunity. And so when the market presents itself, they bought them some times with this contract. And so what I think is going to happen is he's going to try to see if he can look and get some type of role. And if it doesn't work out, maybe he's back in New Orleans. But look, Jameis is, I said this last year, he's the best insurance policy out there if he's not going to start. And so I just don't think, look at the other quarterbacks around the league that are backup situations. I don't see anybody that's really going to stand out for me. And so if they move on from Jameis or Jameis does go on, that leaves a hole. I've thrown out 2 quarterbacks that potentially come in here because of the Clint Kubiak system, which people riot for, is Carson Wentz and Sam Darnold. Mm-hmm. I understand, but when you talk about teaching the new system and doing all those things and somebody that can fit in, they make sense. But with Jameis, it's not ruled out from everything what I understand. But Jameis does want to start, and I think he has the ability to start still in this league. And so we'll find out soon enough, but it's really going to depend on this market. Guys like Russell Wilson are being courted right now, Steelers and Giants. Those are 2 teams that need quarterbacks, right? And there's other teams that need a quarterback. And so I think Winston could be in that conversation.
Sam Darnold's very interesting. I said this a couple of nights ago, got a massive amounts of pushback. If Jameis does leave, you can bring in a guy that knows this system, right? Like, I mean, it's just, I'm not saying Sam Darnold's any good and he's not better than Jameis, but it's not as if that he has to take a massive step back. He doesn't have to learn anything. He knows. Hell, could maybe even help Derek Carr. Like, hey man, this is how we did things in the past. I mean, it would just make a lot of sense there in a fit. And look, I've talked to some people that were even close to Sam that at USC, and they were like, look, I think he knows, like, he's got a long way to go to build himself back. So it would be interesting. All right, John Hendrix, my man. By the way, loving the podcast, man. Loving the content that you're pushing out. Tell everybody where they can catch all your stuff.
Yeah, new show is Second and Saints. It's with Ross Jackson, and so we just decided to do our own thing. Man, it's been fun. I've been out of the game for a while. I used to do podcasting back in the day, and I did it all wrong. It was like 2015, 2016, did hour-long shows. I was like, I don't know. I messed it all up. But then, I tried it again before with Terrence Copper. We had a good thing going. And so, it's time to get back in that space. I've got the setup and just kind of just doing my own thing to grow. And so I appreciate any and all support. It's been really well received. And look, it's just 2 guys that cover this team daily, boots on the ground, that are going to bring you what you need to know about the Saints. And look, we don't have any bias towards anything. We just want to talk football, love talking football, and that's kind of what we do. So check us out there. And obviously all my written work's still on Saints News Network. Nothing's changed there. SI.com/NFL/Saints. And Blake, it's so nice to put my X handle down there. I still can't call it X. It's Twitter still. And, I'm sorry I ruined your games when it comes to September. So just mute me. Mute me is the thing I would suggest. I will ruin your game because I am from the future. Just what I've been told.
Hey, I got to admit, okay, because during games, what I purposely do is turn on notifications for you, and so I'm like, oh man, he's gonna get sacked. Watch it, and then everybody in my house, like everybody's like, the shit does he know? So
just know, if you make anybody out there, if you make some money off me, I need at least 1 to 5% of that. Just
you got to bump that up to 10%, John.
Yeah,
That's
probably like 10 to 15. Let's negotiate
a
little bit, right? But yeah, exactly. But it's just a funny joke, and so I get it, I understand, but it's just something in difference in real time streaming, all this other stuff, and I don't know, my mind works really weird because I could see stuff happen before. I just don't get it.
The Bayou's Dr. Strange. Thank you so much, John.